Our lives today, they're really less about those perfectly curated photo albums, aren't they? It feels like they're more woven into this constant stream of digital stuff.
Yeah.
Quick texts, funny posts on social media, maybe that unexpected email that really hits you.
Oh, absolutely. They feel more real sometimes. These are the true kind of messy but authentic threads of who we actually are.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's true, we've been looking at a whole stack of sources about this idea of digital heirlooms, and what really stands out is how these little fragments, these fleeting messages and posts, they capture a person's voice, their essence, with a kind of precision that, well, a traditional portrait or even a letter just can't match.
That really gets to the heart of our mission for this deep dive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We want to build a clear, sort of actionable roadmap for you listening. How do we responsibly save and curate all these digital communications so they actually paint a vivid, meaningful picture of a life? It feels like we need a system, whether you're thinking about creating a living legacy for yourself or maybe building a really powerful memorial for someone you've lost.
Because that agonizing question is always there, isn't it? How do we stop that really precious text chain or that tweet that just perfectly summed someone up or that pivotal email? How do we stop it all from just vanishing, lost to a forgotten password or a deleted account or maybe a platform just shutting down?
Right.
So yeah, today we're diving into the practical steps, the ethical questions, and even the creative ways to handle this.
Okay, let's start right there with the fundamental why. Why are these digital bits and pieces often, more powerful than the things we traditionally kept, like old letters stuffed in a shoebox?
Well, I think it's their immediacy, their unfiltered nature. You look at an old family letter, and often the language is quite formal, maybe a bit measured, right?
Sure, yeah. Written for posterity, almost.
Exactly. But a text thread between friends or siblings, that often reveals the true core. You see the unguarded jokes, the quick back and forth, the warmth. Single Instagram posts might mark a big milestone, sure, but that string of texts that shows their shared history, their specific sense of humor.
You can almost hear the person speaking when you read their text sometimes.
That's it precisely. You hear their voice.
And I think keeping that voice alive, that specific way they sounded in writing, that seems like the most powerful reason to do this. And it's interesting, the sources we looked at mentioned it's not just for people either. People are curating digital legacies for their pets too.
Oh, definitely. That series of texts where you're joking about your dog's silly habits or sending pictures back and forth, that becomes this incredibly precious, tangible artifact of your bond. It's those little everyday micro moments that really build the picture.
But that immediacy you mentioned, that's also the challenge, isn't it?
It is. Because these memories aren't sitting neatly in a box under the bed. They're scattered all over the place, different cloud servers, proprietary social media platforms, different phone operating systems. They all have their own rules, their own ways of working.
So to stop the story from getting lost, we have to become sort of digital archaeologists.
That's a great way to put it. Which leads us right into the first big hurdle. Step one, actually gathering all those digital threads together.
Okay, let's get practical then. How do we even begin to pull this data, off the internet, off our devices, without just taking thousands of screenshots? Which sounds exhausting.
Right, and screenshots are, well, they're not ideal anyway. They lack metadata, context. The first really universal piece of advice from all the sources is stop screenshotting and start looking for the data export feature.
Oh, okay.
Almost every major platform that holds troves of your stuff, think X, Instagram, Facebook, posts, comments, photos, the works. They usually have some kind of tool designed specifically to let you download an archive of a user's history.
So we're hunting for a button probably buried somewhere in the account settings, maybe under your account or privacy.
Exactly. You might have to dig a bit. And the goal is to get this usually quite large file. It's a ZIP file, maybe containing JSON files or HTML, that basically holds almost everything that user posted or interacted with on that platform.
Okay.
For example, the archive tool for X, the sources point this out, gives you a downloadable file of pretty much every tweet, every interaction. Similarly, Instagram and Facebook have data export tools. They can be a bit slow sometimes. You might have to wait a day or two for the link.
Right.
But it's really the only practical way to get a bulk timestamp record of all that content.
Okay, so that covers the more public-facing stuff. But what about the really intimate conversations, like text messages? Those often feel the most revealing, especially if you're trying to capture someone's personality, their humor.
Yeah, texts are crucial, and they require different strategies, usually tied to the phone's operating system. For an iPhone, just relying on your standard iCloud backup. Well, that doesn't easily let you export specific text threads as, say, a readable document.
Right, it's all locked up in the backup file.
Exactly. So you often need to look at third-party tools. Something like iMazing comes up, often tools that specialize in pulling those specific conversation histories out of the phone's backup file and converting them into a format you can actually read and save, like a PDF or a simple text file.
Okay, makes sense. And what about for Android users? Is it similar?
Android is often a bit more straightforward here. There are usually apps, things like SMS backup and restore are commonly mentioned, that can save those conversations directly, often to a cloud drive like Google Drive. And they save it in a clean, recoverable format.
So potentially less hassle than with iPhone backups.
It can be, yeah. It often removes the need for, rooting the device or doing really technical manual extractions.
Let's broaden out again. Emails. That's another big one. That's where we often document major life stuff, career changes, maybe profound letters to family, job offers. How do we grab those efficiently, but crucially, avoid drowning in the 99% junk mail?
The tools are definitely robust for email. If you're dealing with Gmail, the answer is pretty much always Google Takeout.
Right, I've used that.
Yeah, it's powerful. If you're using Outlook, there's usually an internal export feature within the application itself. But the advice here is less about the specific tool and more about your strategy. Don't just dump everything.
Please don't.
Right. The sources really emphasize focusing your export. Maybe you have specific folders or labels like family letters or work milestones. Export those. That targeted approach is crucial for keeping the data manageable later on.
Good point. And we shouldn't forget all the other places we live digitally now. WhatsApp, Discord, maybe even private messages on Reddit.
Absolutely. Those can hold really significant stuff too. The general rule applies there as well. Always check the platform's own help center or support pages first. Look for their specific data export instructions.
Okay.
Now, the methods can vary quite a bit. WhatsApp, for instance, often makes you export chats one by one, which can be tedious.
Oh, wow.
But the principle holds. There's usually some way provided to get your data out, allowing you to gather those final important pieces of communication.
So the tools are generally there if you look for them.
They are, but before anyone just dives headfirst into downloading gigabytes of personal data, we absolutely have to talk about the ethical side. The sources are very clear on this pro tip.
Right. This feels really important.
It is. When you're dealing with deeply personal data, whether it's for your own living portrait or for someone else's memorial, consent and privacy are paramount. If it's for someone who has passed away, you must follow the expressed wishes of the deceased, if known, or the decisions of their family or executor regarding access and sharing.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But I imagine getting that kind of consent, especially when, say, text messages or emails involve other living people, people who might not want their side of the conversation included in a memorial.
Yeah.
That must get complicated.
It can be incredibly difficult, and the sources really stress being preemptively cautious. If a conversation feels sensitive or heavily involves a third party who's maybe a private person, the general advice is to either anonymize their contributions, remove names, identifying details,
Okay.
or perhaps more safely, keep that particular piece restricted. Maybe it only belongs in a very private family-only archive, not something shared more widely. An ethical digital legacy has to respect the privacy of everyone involved, not just the main subject.
That's a really crucial distinction.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume we've navigated all that carefully. We've used the export tools, respected privacy, and now we have this, well, probably a giant, chaotic digital pile of raw data archive files, text exports, email folders. It might look like a massive unreadable spreadsheet or a folder full of weirdly named files.
It's the digital shoebox stage.
Yeah, exactly. How do we turn that digital jumble into something that actually feels like a story, a coherent narrative?
Right. This is step 2, organizing with care. And it really is the bridge from just technical collection into actual storytelling. The sources suggest tackling this with 2 main strategies, kind of in parallel.
Okay, what are they?
The first one is perhaps the most straightforward, creating a timeline. You need to sort the content chronologically as best you can. This is pretty essential because, well, the basic arc of a life unfolds over time, right?
Makes sense.
You'd want to log the dates for each piece of content, maybe jot down key themes or people involved. Simple tools can work fine here. Even a spreadsheet program like Google Sheets, or maybe something a bit more visual like Notion could work well for this initial cataloging phase, just getting it in date order.
Okay, timeline first.
Ta-da.
But chronology doesn't always capture the spirit of a person, does it? Like their sense of humor might be scattered across years.
You're absolutely right. And that's where the second strategy comes in, highlighting themes. This involves grouping content not just by date, but by categories. Things like career achievements or family moments or maybe running jokes or travel adventures.
Ah, I see.
So going back to that example of the funny texts about the dog, by grouping all of those together, even if they span several years, you create an entire focused section dedicated just to that specific source of humor and connection. That might be a much more powerful narrative piece than just seeing those texts scattered chronologically.
Yeah, that thematic approach feels really important for capturing personality. Okay, so we're organizing by timeline and by theme. But then comes what feels like maybe the hardest part, the filtering. We have all this data, but presumably we don't need to save every single thing, right?
Oh, absolutely not. And this is where the emotional labor, as you put it, really comes in, filtering for meaning. Why is this step so vital? Because if you include everything, you just drown the important stuff. You lose the signal in the noise. The sources really stress that filtering is what defines the essence you're trying to preserve. You're actively looking for the content that truly captures their unique voice, their core values, or maybe a pivotal, life-changing moment.
So less is more, in a way.
Very much so. Think about it. One single, carefully chosen, heartfelt email where someone outlines their philosophy on life. That probably speaks volumes more than 100 routine back and forth emails about meeting times or deadlines.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I imagine, though, that filtering process, especially if you're doing this for a loved one who's passed away, must be incredibly emotionally draining. Do the sources offer any advice on how to manage that? Should you try to do it alone or maybe involve others?
That's a great question. The general consensus seems to be try not to do it alone, especially if it's for a memorial. Involving close family or friends in the filtering process does a couple of things. First, it provides emotional support, which is huge. But second, and just as importantly, it broadens the perspective on what's actually considered pivotal or meaningful. What you might have dismissed as a routine text could actually be part of a defining inside joke for someone else.
Ah, good point. Different people remember different facets.
Exactly. So that collaborative filtering helps ensure a richer, more authentic, and more complete portrait in the end.
Okay, so we've gathered, we've organized by timeline and theme, and we've collaboratively filtered for meaning. What's next?
Now we move to step 3, preservation. Proper, secure storage. We need to start treating these curated digital heirlooms like the truly priceless assets they are, ensuring they're stored safely enough to, hopefully, endure for decades.
So what does that look like? Robust, long-term preservation in, today's world? We hear a lot about the cloud, but also about needing physical backups. Is it one or the other?
It really needs to be both. A multi-tiered approach is best. First, definitely leverage secure cloud storage. We're talking platforms like Google Drive, Dropbox, iCloud, but critically, you must enable security features. Use strong, unique passwords. Absolutely turn on two-factor authentication. That's 2FA, the secondary code.
Right, the text message code or app code.
Exactly. And for really sensitive documents, consider using file encryption before you even upload them. These steps are crucial to prevent unauthorized access.
Okay, cloud storage with strong security. What's the second tier?
The second tier, which you absolutely cannot neglect, is physical backups. Save copies of your curated collection onto reliable external hard drives or maybe high-quality USB drives. And don't just toss them in a drawer. Store them safely, ideally away from potential environmental dangers like extreme heat, moisture, or magnetic fields.
Somewhere cool and dry, basically.
Pretty much. And there's a key maintenance step here, too.
Ah, I remember reading this. The sources mentioned updating these physical backups like yearly. Why is that specific timing so important? I mean, don't hard drives just sit there?
You'd think so, but unfortunately, they don't last forever unchanged. We're fighting against something often called bit rot or data degradation. It sounds technical, but basically, even on stationary digital media, the tiny magnetic charges that represent your data can fade over time, or the file systems themselves can develop errors.
Wow. Okay, so the data can just decay.
It can, slowly but surely. So updating those physical backups yearly isn't just about adding new things. It's about refreshing the data, rewriting it, which helps ensure the file systems stay healthy and you catch potential corruption before it leads to permanent data loss. Think of it as, I don't know, the digital equivalent of checking the seals on an archival box.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so preserve securely in the cloud and on regularly updated physical drives. That brings us nicely, I think, to step 4, curation with heart. This sounds like where we move from just having archived data to actually creating a story that resonates. This is the creative part, right?
Yeah. Exactly. This is where we turn that organized, filtered, and preserved jumble into narrative art, into something that can be shared and experienced. And there are some really wonderful ways to do this now. One excellent option mentioned is creating a digital scrapbook.
Okay, like a modern version of the old paper ones.
Sort of, yeah. Using accessible visual design tools, Canva is mentioned a lot. You can design a really beautiful visual timeline or thematic collection. You can combine screenshots of texts, key social media posts, photos, but then crucially, you add your own captions.
Ah, captions seem vital for context, right? Because a random tweet from, say, 2012 might mean absolutely nothing to a future relative looking at this.
Precisely. The caption is where you explain why that specific tweet was important, or the context behind a shared family meme, or maybe the backstory to a difficult career change that was documented in an email chain. It adds the narrative layer.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What are the creative options?
Another really powerful tool is the video montage. You can create short, often very emotionally resonant videos, maybe using clips from old social media videos or even just screen captures of really profound text messages, perhaps set to their favorite piece of music.
And tools for that are getting easier to use too, aren't they? Like Adobe Express or similar apps.
Absolutely. These kinds of tools make pretty high-quality digital storytelling remarkably accessible to almost anyone now, which is a huge shift from even a few years ago. You don't need to be a video editor anymore.
That's great. What about options that allow for collaboration, bringing other people into the curation?
Yeah, that leads to what feels like the most modern and interactive form, interactive memorials. There are now dedicated memorial platforms. A life portrait is mentioned as one example where you can build these dynamic, living web pages. And the key feature is that family and friends can often contribute their own memories directly to the page, adding stories, photos, maybe even digital mementos. This weaves together a much more collaborative, collective story that goes beyond just what one person curated. It makes the portrait exponentially richer, really.
That sounds incredibly powerful, actually.
Yeah.
A living, evolving tribute.
It can be. And that focus on the future leads us right into the final critical step, step 5, planning for the future. Because all this work, gathering, organizing, curating, preserving, it's kind of wasted if these precious digital heirlooms just get locked away again after we pass on.
Right. Someone needs the keys to the kingdom, so to speak.
Exactly. And that role, in digital terms, is filled by the legacy contact, or sometimes called the digital executor. Major platforms like Apple and Google now have specific features allowing you to designate someone who is authorized to manage or access your accounts after you die.
Setting that up feels, well, non-negotiable if you want this stuff preserved.
It really is. According to the sources, this is something you should absolutely set up now. And just as important, you need to securely share any necessary access details, maybe not passwords directly, but instructions on how to use that legacy contact status with those trusted family members or your executor now. Well, you can.
So they aren't left trying to fight the platforms with death certificates later on, which sounds like a nightmare.
It can be a long and difficult process, yes. So setting up legacy contacts and having that conversation is key. And there's one more point about planning, especially for those creating a living portrait, one for themselves.
What's that?
Maintenance. The final mandate is to remember that a living legacy isn't static. You need to revisit the collection periodically, maybe yearly, when you update your backups, add new milestones, new defining posts, new important conversations. It's a continual process of collecting and refining your own story as it unfolds.
That's a really lovely thought, tending to your own digital garden over time. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What does all this mean for you, the listener?
It feels like the big takeaway is that every tiny digital piece really can count. That quick text, that silly post, it might capture a life's genuine joy or struggle in a way nothing else does.
Absolutely. And the good news is that technology, from those sometimes clunky data export tools to these quite sophisticated memorial platforms, has given us the means to actually do this preservation work meaningfully if we choose to.
Right.
By thoughtfully following these steps we've talked about, gathering responsibly, filtering insightfully, preserving securely, and curating creatively, you really can transform what starts as a chaotic collection of bits and bytes into a vibrant, truly authentic portrait.
Keeping the voice of a loved one or even your own future voice ringing clear in this modern age.
Exactly. It's about connecting the past, the present, and the future through these digital threads. Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you to carry forward from this deep dive, something to maybe mull over today. Consider this. If you had to choose one single digital thread right now, just one to represent your own life or your core personality for some future portrait, what would it be?
That's a tough one.
Is it maybe a heartfelt email you sent? A particularly witty tweet you're proud of? Or maybe a long, nostalgic text chain with an old friend about a childhood memory? Think about what that one piece is, and then ask yourself critically, are you already taking steps to make sure that specific artifact isn't locked away forever behind a password you might forget tomorrow? Maybe today's the day to start saving that particular story.